Thank you all for joining us today. Our webinar today is on music in the small church. Music is a very important part of our Anglican heritage, and for many parishioners, one of the key distinctives of Anglican worship. In my family, my father, throughout my own life, and now my daughter, singing in or on behalf of the church has always been a central part of our Anglican worship. But the reality is only a handful of our continuing churches have the musical resources of a small English cathedral, and even our healthiest churches will at best have a modest choir. So we have the aspirational example and repertoire written for the great English cathedrals and colleges, but at best are limited to the resources of a small or medium-sized English parish. Our three panelists are from three continuing churches. From east to west, Father Corey French is the Dean and Rector of St. Edward's Cathedral in Indianapolis, Indiana. Father French. Father Andrew Harrah is vicar of St. Alban's Church in Peoria, Arizona. Father Harrah. And then Sarah Buchanan is the music director at St. Thomas Anglican in Fullerton, California. And I'm Joel West. I'm part of the Continuing Forward Executive Committee, and I'm a former choir member at many parishes, including my current St. Matthew's in Newport Beach. So to get started, each of you in turn, tell us a little bit about your parish. When did you join? What role do you play in planning the musical worship? And how are the decisions made about the big issues and sort of the week-to-week decisions? And I'll start with you, Father Drew.
Thank you, Joel. Yes, I'm the vicar of St. Albans in Peoria, Arizona. Peoria is a suburb of Phoenix, and we are a mission of the Diocese of the Western States of the Anglican Province of Christ the King. Our average Sunday attendance is somewhere between, I would say, over the last 6 months, it's about 20 to 25. So it's very small. And dear people, wonderful people. They've been very good to me. I've been there for a year. I was appointed by Bishop Ashman, the ordinary of the Diocese of the Western States, last August. And that was the beginning of my priestly ministry as well. So this is my first experience in parish ministry. And regarding the music of the church, we're kind of in a fortunate situation just because I myself come from a very musical family. So I'm a singer. My father is a professional musician. He's a singer, songwriter, and I got that gene, very, very musical family. So I played piano growing up. I read music. I sing the hymns. They just come easily to me. And so I have been leading the congregational worship basically by myself for the last year. For the first year, we did not have an organist. It was all a cappella. When I first got there, they had one of those canned machines, and I thought, I don't want to do that. And so we got rid of that, and then we did a cappella. But then within the last month, God has answered our prayers. We now have an organist. He's very good, and he's just we work very well together, and he understands our traditions. So thanks be to God for that. I think I don't want to spend too much time. Is that?
Yeah, that's a good place to start. We're going to ask some follow-up questions.
Sure.
Sarah, what about your own worship?
So my church is a mission plan of St. Matthew's. We're in Fullerton, California. I would say we have about 20 to 40, 45 people on a good Sunday, but it is a smaller church as well. We're part of the ACC, and then my role, I joined in 2020. I pick the hymns for each week, and I'm their organist, pianist, vocalist. It's just myself and then my husband who will lead on guitar. So it's really two vocalists and two instrumentalists for most Sundays. And the week to week, I would say I'm pretty autonomous in my role. So I get to pick a lot of the hymns, and Father Kevin, our rector, will collaborate from time to time, or he'll tell me his preference for certain music or his dislike of certain music. But he's for the most part, we work well together. He lets me pretty much function independently. But there, of course, we talk about the services. And now that I've been there for 5 years, we kind of feel like we have a little bit of an autopilot practice going. But yeah, I've enjoyed my time so far and love getting to pick music and participate every week.
Thank you, Sarah. Father Corey?
Well, thank you for having me and putting this together, Joel. So I've been at St. Edward's since 2015. My wife and I moved here from Virginia, and so we've been at the parish for a decade. But I was actually ordained out of the parish as well, so I've been serving as a priest here since 2018. Uh, was made rector in 2020. So, um, but really, for most of my tenure here, I've been sort of in charge of putting the bulletin together and I guess exercising the rector's prerogative of choosing the music. But we're fortunate to have a good sort of it's a theater sort of portative organ that's quite a nice instrument. Um, we have an organist, although he wouldn't say that he's an organist. He's a pianist by training, so he doesn't play the organ. He doesn't play the pedals on the organ. So, um, but nevertheless, he's a good instrumentalist, and his background is he was in the American Boy Choir growing up, so he has an excellent voice. So we're fortunate to have him. Very blessed to have him as a parishioner who also serves as our organist and cantor on occasion. But basically, I've sort of have kind of had free reign over the music for most of my time, and that's been good and bad. Sort of picking the hymns and trying to introduce some hymns that were not as familiar to people. It's sort of there are some Sundays where it sounded quite good, and then there are some Sundays where people don't really aren't at all familiar with what I've picked, and so it doesn't sound quite so good. But my background is I have no musical training at all, and so but I decided very early on that I was very committed to doing a fully chanted liturgy every Sunday. And so I think my parishioners will attest that my abilities to chant have improved over that time. But that's sort of so yeah, I've kind of grown in my capabilities and the parish has sort of grown in our capabilities musically as well over that time. But it's been it's been a process as everything is. So
Thank you, Father Corey. So my next question, a little bit sort of boring in on some of what you hinted at, which is, how much, if somebody came to your church for the first time, how much singing would they hear during a service? And who's doing the singing, and is it different at different times of year or for special occasions? And so with that, I'll start with Sarah this time, and then go on to Father Corey.
Yes. So our church, I would say you hear, myself and my husband singing. When we had Drew at our church, you could really hear him singing, which was really great. But I would say our congregational participation is on the lower end. I would say actually a lot of people enjoy singing. They just don't like to hear themselves sing. And so it tends to feel like they are participating, but just so no one else can really hear them that much. So it's been an interesting, I came from a different, smaller church, and we had very robust, energetic singers, and then moving to St. Thomas with a similar size congregation, but less maybe enthusiasm for singing in that way has been interesting. So you'll hear, myself and my husband, and then some of the congregation singing. And then of course, our ministers, like our priests and any servers, I always say I can hear them singing as they process through the church. Our church building is also very small, so the acoustics really amplify voices, which is the good and bad of, I think, why people don't like to project in the congregation when they're singing, but why you could hear our ministers like Father Drew singing when he was there. Um, and our, what was the second part of your question?
Well, just who was singing basically, and does it vary based on? Is it different based on different seasons or different services, or is it pretty much the same sort of for every 52 weeks a year?
Yes. So on our bigger services with more attendance, we have obviously a larger volume of people and singers. But I would say it also, I think, like Father Corey was saying, depends on the congregational familiarity of the songs we're singing. So if it's a pretty tried and true hymn like "Come Thou Fount" or "Be Thou My Vision," the volume increases. I think also our Holy Week services tend to also have more participation as well. And I've tried to hire an instrumentalist in the past, or we'll do special services with small choirs. So that changes the landscape a little bit. But for the most part, it's very similar, most Sunday masses.
Got it. Thank you, Sarah. Father Corey?
So as I mentioned, I was sort of committed from early on in my priestly ministry to doing um, a full sung mass every Sunday, and that's pretty much been the norm. I can't think of a Sunday where I haven't done that. So there's a lot of chanting from me. We chant the full. Um, we have two cantors, as I mentioned. We have an organist and we have another gentleman who has great voice. So we have a couple of cantors who can alternate from week to week, chanting the minor propers. But we sing the entire ordinary, including the creed. Um, I chant the epistle, gospel, everything else. So um, I'm chanting quite a bit. The cantors are chanting quite a bit. And then we also have hymns that are, sung generally and sort of. So there's, I think, a pretty good mix of both chanting from sort of music from within the sanctuary and music from within the nave, if you will. And so I think we also a year ago started doing choral evensong on a more regular basis, and that has sort of evolved into something that we're doing. We kind of started out doing it about quarterly, and now we do it about monthly. And we also, not to get too far ahead, but we also started introducing just sort of a bi-weekly music practice on Tuesday evenings. That's sort of just open to whoever wants to come and join in, and we run through the hymns that we're going to be doing for the next Sunday or two. If we're doing evensong, we practice doing chanting the psalms and the canticles. If we're changing to a different setting of the ordinary, we practice that. So I think that we've been doing that now for a couple of months and maybe a little longer than that. We started over the summer, but that I think has actually been a huge boost in terms of getting people to feel more comfortable with singing, encouraging them to be a bit more robust and voluble in their participation. So and I think that started, I can see, you can kind of hear on Sundays how I think that started to bear fruit in our worship. So, yeah.
Great. Thank you, Father Corey. Father Drew?
Father Corey, that's a great idea. I'm going to utilize that at St. Albans. So thank you for that. Also, Sarah, I was with Sarah, as she said, at St. Thomas, and she's doing an excellent job. I mean, she's a wonderful, wonderful musician and beautiful voice, and she plays both the piano and the organ beautifully. And Tim, her husband as well, does a great job. So very fortunate to have them at St. Thomas. When I first got to St. Albans, very small. I mean, we've grown over the last year, but when I first got there, and they were not accustomed to singing at all, and so I didn't make any changes. I just kind of did what they were accustomed to. But I would say within about 3 months, which is not very long, but within 3 months, I had signaled to them beforehand, we're going to start singing more and more, and they were totally comfortable with that. They definitely wanted to move in that direction. And so I started basically to introduce more ceremonial. And so now we have every Sunday a full sung mass. Now, by that, let me clarify. I mean, we're not singing the creed, um, the epistle, and
Lord's Prayer.
say that again.
You sing the Lord's Prayer?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
We're doing the Lord's Prayer, the Sursum Corda, um, all the parts of the Mass with the exception of the Creed. We're singing the hymns, of course. We don't have a cantor, so that's the next thing we're praying for. So God brought us an organist. We trust that He'll bring us a cantor at some point. So I'm the one who's doing the minor propers, chanting them. A little strange, to have the priest do that, but it works okay. So we're basically singing as much as possible, and I think like with Sarah and Father Corey, the people are not accustomed to singing, which is sad to me. I would love, that's my goal. I want the parish to be a singing parish. And I think the desire is there. They just don't feel confident in their ability they don't know the melodies. And some of that is just because people are coming into the parish that they don't have a knowledge of the traditional hymnody. And so they're from evangelical churches that have been singing contemporary worship. And so they just don't know, unless they're, as Sarah was saying, unless they're very, very well-known hymns like Be Thou My Vision, they don't know them. And so that's been a challenge, but I think they know that when I'm there, I'm going to lead them well, and that they can kind of try to follow along as best they can. They're eager to do so. But yes, we're doing as much singing as possible.
Well, that's actually a great segue to sort of our next topic, which is, oh, wait, first, just to get off this. So what are you happy with or satisfied with or proud of? And what do you think is sort of the greatest area of improvement for the singing in your parish? Father Corey?
Well, I think sort of as I said, one of the kind of beginning to do the biweekly music rehearsal has really made a significant difference um, in terms of people's familiarity with the music, in terms of their comfort level. And I've seen, we started doing over really around the time we started doing the Kyrie and the Gloria from the Missa Orbis Factor, which is sort of nice, kind of it's the setting that's traditionally used on Sundays. And so we introduced that and really, I mean, went through rehearsing it a few Sundays, started doing that, and then we rolled it out on a Sunday, a few weeks later, and it sounded great, which was surprising to me. And it really, I think, it helped to overcome some of the we used to have a fair amount of resistance to any kind of change in the music. Introducing a new hymn, I mean, that was always, like I said, it was always a bit of a struggle. But over time, sort of getting people accustomed to a broader diet of hymnody, and then also more recently introducing the opportunity for people who may not feel as comfortable engaging with the music to sort of to be able to rehearse it and practice it and learn it in a low stakes environment with it's not the sort of the I guess the performative atmosphere of Sunday morning. It's made a huge difference. And so I'm really we're not, we're on our way, but I think that it really, if the difference between how Sunday morning sounded even a couple of years ago, between that and how it sounds now, I think is a testimony uh to my parish's willingness to just sort of be flexible and try things out. And so I'm proud of them for that, and I'm proud of how we've grown in our capacity to worship.
You mentioned the idea of a rehearsal now and again. How many people show up and which people are showing up? The weakest people, the most gung-ho people, the people who have the free time?
It's a little mix of all three. We have, I would say, so I guess I should have said early on, on Sunday, we're about 25 to 30 people. Um, and on Tuesdays for music practice, we probably have around 10 or 11 pretty regularly. It's a pretty consistent group, but we've kind of pick up some additional people here and there. And it's sort of all over the place. It's people, our cantor, the organist always is there to help lead it. We have our other cantor is usually there. My wife is there, and her background is she's a good singer. She was in the collegiate, the sort of the women's glee club at Purdue. So she has an excellent voice and and a great facility with music, which helps. But it's sort of all over the place. It's people who, don't feel that confident, to the people who have sort of formal training in singing. And it kind of, it's a little mix of everyone. We always provide dinner. I always pick up some pizzas so people know that they will have dinner when they arrive, which helps to incentivize the practice. But yeah, it's been a healthy number of people the entire time we've been doing it, and it's kind of a mix of all three of those grooves.
Thank you, Father Corey. So, Father Drew, again, what are you happy with, and what would you like to improve?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm happy insofar as because I'm confident in my own ability to lead well the singing. So I know that if I'm there, the 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 level of excellence will be appropriate for a sung mass.
Does that mean you never get a vacation?
Yeah, yeah, right. Yeah. When my wife gave birth to our fourth, we had a deacon's liturgy, and apparently nobody sung at all. And deacon came back to me and said, "Father, we missed you terribly, your voice." So everything just fell apart when I wasn't there. But yeah, so if I'm there, I know it's going to be okay. I want to get, of course, as I said before, I want to get to the point where people know how to sing. They have a knowledge of the standard hymns. That isn't, there's some of those hymns in that hymnal. I don't know. I read music so I can figure it out, but I don't know the hymns, so I don't expect them to know. But there's some standard hymns that they ought to know that they don't know. So I think that's where I'd like to get, and just more, as Father Corey said, the facility with singing. I'd love for the people to be able to get there. When Sarah mentioned the previous parish that she was at, where even though the size was about the same, but people were singing robustly, it's a really incredible experience when you're there. It does transform your experience of the worship. And so that's what I desire for the parish, as I know we all do.
Thank you, Father Drew. Sarah?
I would say I'm very thankful that Father Kevin and I have a similar vision for what we would like the music to be that fits our parish. I would say the combination of traditional hymnody with accessibility for the congregation is a strength of our music program. And our church is smaller, and so I think also being able to hear individual members of the congregation tell me their personal experience with the hymn, their positive experience with the hymn is very meaningful, because it strengthens my relationship with them, but also the music's relationship to the liturgy and the congregation. And so I find smaller parishes to be very encouraging in that way. And I think similar to Father Drew and Father Corey, congregational participation is always an area that I think we could improve in. I mean, because it is so meaningful and really a part of the life of the parish to me for a Sunday Mass, because that's worship. And so any activity that increases congregational worshipful participation is very important. We have a lot of young children, so I really wish we had more of any children's choir. I haven't done it. It's not my strength. I to be honest, find teaching children really tiring. And especially a group of 15 just sounds slightly insurmountable for me at the moment. But again, it's also me and my husband, so there's no one else to even play piano. So there, I would say part of that is budget. Not like I need a larger budget, but we're a church plant, so we don't have necessarily a consistent budget. I think that's something I would really like to nail down with our vestry, because it would provide more opportunity for congregational participation in the end, which to me is my goal. Anything that increases worship.
Thank you, Sarah. Okay, so let's go on to the question of the structure. And I know Father Andrew already addressed some of this, but when somebody comes into your church, what are they going to hear? And in England, they draw the distinction between the cathedral model and the parish model. And in the continuing church, most of our parishes would be considered at best a medium-sized church. And in the heyday of the Church of England or the Episcopal Church. So, but okay, so the first thing is, what is sung right now in your church, and what would you like to be sung that isn't currently sung? So we have hymns. I didn't hear anybody mention a choir. The sung elements of the Mass. Is there? And I'm talking now just about congregational singing. I know, Sarah, having attended St. Thomas, that you and your husband sing at times when the congregation doesn't sing. So I'm really trying to today I want to focus on trying getting the congregation to sing more and getting them engaged and making it more meaningful. So, Father Drew, do you want to talk about kind of what is sung, and maybe if there's anything you want to add that you don't have yet, but you'd like to add, or you add on special occasions?
Yeah, most of the service is sung. So maybe, we could introduce the creed at some point. They're not doing that right now. I just last week I had deacon. So at the end of the post-communion collect, that's after the collect that I think according to the rubric, it's supposed to be the priest that prays it alone after Holy Communion. But the custom in lots of our churches is for everybody to pray it together. So we're saying that together. But then there's the post communion from the missal, and I chant that, and then immediately following that, the deacon gives the dismissal. We have a deacon at the parish, so he gives the dismissal, and he's been saying that, and then I've been giving the blessing. I've been chanting the blessing. And last week I introduced with him, I just said, you got to do it. I told him, you got to do it. You got to sing it. So he did. He gave the apostolic greeting and then gave the dismissal. Worked out just fine. He did fine. So we might get to the point, I don't know, where maybe they're comfortable chanting the gospel. I don't know if that's appropriate from week to week every Sunday. Maybe that's too high. The ceremonial's too high. But Father Corey's shaking his head no. Yeah, so we may get there where literally everything is sung.
I personally, and I'm actually trying to lay back here, but I personally like the idea of variation of the season. I mean, much as none of the canticles compare to the Missa Marialis, the other ones, forget it. I mean, why do we even bother to have them in the hymnal? But nonetheless, I think variation is good as part of the rhythm, particularly since people have been in a church for 5 or 10 or 15 years and mix it up a little. So I could imagine that you might do more in sort of more high seasons, and certainly in the summer, resources are limited, maybe fewer people are around. Maybe you'd have something a little more simpler. So step it up by chanting more, say in penitential season and the very festal seasons like Christmas and Easter. I don't know. That's just something I've seen done. Just so that it's not same old, as opposed to we're coming up to a period where we're going to be singing more. Great. Or, we're singing more. Depending on whether you like or don't like singing. So anyway, that's just a thought. Sarah?
So congregational singing, we have our processional, the service music. On some services, we do reply to the Sursum Corda, the Lord's Prayer. We have not sung the Creed, but with some of the some of the higher services, there's more congregational canticles that we sing together. I will say I would love for us to chant more congregationally. So specifically the Psalms. I'm really I came from ACNA, and we uh, chanted the Psalms every Sunday. Well, one psalm or two psalm, every Sunday. And that was really beautiful for me. And at our current church, we just don't really incorporate chant very often. And I find chant to be fairly accessible, maybe foreign for some people at first, but in general, fairly accessible. And of course, you can have very simple chant or very complicated chant, but the more simple chant is very accessible and such an important part of the Anglican tradition. So I would love it if we chanted the Psalms more. I also would love it if we chanted more at evening prayer, but I can't be there all the time. And I think I don't want to burden someone else with that responsibility right now, but eventually I would love that.
Yeah, I would say that evening prayer, as you say, there's a staffing issue, but evening prayer to me feels like an opportunity to step things up because it's a shorter, simpler service. And so therefore, even if you have your ringers prepared, they have to prepare a smaller number of things for a given service than they would for a Sunday Eucharist that goes for 75 or 90 minutes. But anyway, that's my own experience as a choir boy and now in a number of congregations. Father Corey?
Yeah, so we, as I said, I mean, we start, we sing a processional. We started doing the Aspergus every Sunday. Well, we started with
What is the Aspergus for those who don't know?
That's right. So that's where at the beginning, as a memorial of our baptism, at the beginning of Sunday Mass, the priest goes through and sprinkles everyone with holy water. But there are two traditional sort of you chant an antiphon and a psalm that goes along with that. So the traditional one throughout the year is the Asperges Me, Thou shalt purge me with hyssop, O Lord. And then during Eastertide, it's the Vidi Aquam, which is I saw water coming out from the temple. So we started in Easter. I started on Easter Sunday with the Vidi Aquam, and then we have continued doing it. And then, like I said, we have minor proppers are chanted, the ordinaries sung by everyone. Um, we do other hymns throughout things, I chant basically everything that can be chanted. And to your point, Joel, I do think, one of the ways we do try to build in some variety is, for instance, during both Advent and Lent, we'll use the Marbeck setting of the ordinary, which is much simpler, more sparse. And then during Eastertide, we'll do settings of the ordinary that are much fuller and sort of more vibrant. But yeah, but I do think it can be.
So you never do the medieval one, you only do the Marbeck?
That's my now that we're doing music rehearsals, my goal is to do the traditional Gregorian settings for both for the traditional Advent and Lenten settings for those seasons, or at least maybe introduce the Kyrie from that setting in Advent, and then in Lent maybe work on the Sanctus and the Agnus Dei. But uh, so, I mean, in terms of things I would like to add, I mean, eventually I would like to get to the point where we have at least a 4 or 5 voice choir that can do anthems more regularly during communion or wherever. Um, the biggest challenge for me is in terms of wanting, my ambitions to sing everything as Holy Week is always a struggle, as especially being the only priest on staff, not having good, as my wife likes to remind me, not having very good voice technique. So trying to get through Holy Week without completely wrecking my voice is an annual challenge for me. So I would like to get to the point where I'm able to get through Holy Week without my voice sort of croaking on Good Friday, which I guess maybe is appropriate, but but I think this year I'm going to try to do in our music rehearsal, get more of our people involved in chanting more of the all of the music for Holy Week, but it's a marathon. But otherwise, I mean, it's really getting a small choir together is kind of my next major objective. And we're blessed to have people who have enough people who have good musical have musical training and skills to be able, I hope to be able to put that together eventually.
Great. Thank you, Father Corey. So, and we're kind of getting into really an important issue to me, since when we switched from being Presbyterians to Episcopalians, I was immediately put into the boy choir in San Diego. So it goes way back in my memories. And so what is the level of congregation singing like in your parish? And are there things that people seem to do better on? And do you mix it up between giving them their spinach and giving them their cotton candy? Or, how do you trade off this issue of, say, the works that are maybe traditional or the texts are very meaningful for the occasion, which, on Trinity 17 isn't really, it's always a stretch to find a hymn for Trinity 13 or Trinity 17. But, in the high season from the first week of Advent to Pentecost, there are just so many great hymns that reinforce the lessons and the themes of the season. So, what is the level of singing, and to what degree does it vary based on the familiarity of the music or the simplicity of the music? And I guess start with you, Sarah.
Yeah, so I think, like I said previously, more familiar hymns have a obviously higher level of participation. And I
Define
think
familiar. Are you saying Baptist hymns or Lutheran hymns, or?
I would say pretty ecumenical. So, like Amazing Grace, for instance, most people,
Yeah.
pretty much everyone knows that hymn. So a high degree of participation. I actually, maybe more specifically though, especially during the Trinity season, I feel like we can relax a little bit. So in the communion hymns, I think like a couple Sundays ago, we sang "In Christ Alone," which, is not something I would do and a high mass, right? But our congregation really participated, and so I try to be sensitive. And it's a decent hymn. So I actually think, but like most of us probably came from a non-denom or evangelical background. So some of those, when we I don't know, sneak them into the service, have a pretty high degree of participation. Of course, the hymns that we maybe sing once a year, like on Maundy Thursday, not as high, but sometimes maybe the service, like the liturgy and the service itself, lets people sing louder because of the presence of their own worship. But I would say I do try and mix it up. So the processional, the way the readings, I always base the hymns off of the readings. Sometimes it's a little bit more of a stretch than others, but that's kind of where I start. And I always think of the processional as something where you're just opening the door. So it shouldn't be something with a huge amount of resistance. And it should be something substantial enough that you're not just entering into worship without thinking. So something that kind of meets that criteria. And then for the communion hymns, it depends. The first communion hymn most people are receiving, so I don't feel like it has to be incredibly accessible because most people aren't even singing at that point. So something that the congregation is familiar with, but maybe doesn't need, it can be a little bit more difficult or a little bit less familiar. And then the recessional is usually the one that sends people forth. So whatever that should be semi-familiar also, at least in tune. But I try and always, if there's a difficult hymn, it's not going to be 4 difficult hymns or 4 unfamiliar hymns for the congregation, because I think we would all leave feeling a little bit less, well, maybe more sanctified in one sense, but definitely not bolstered to go out into the world.
Well, I've always heard it said that the final hymn has to leave them their toes a tapping, and so therefore all the difficulty or angst that you subjected them to in the previous hour will be forgotten if the final hymn is one that everybody knows and sings out joyfully. Of course, that would argue against ending with St. Patrick's breastplate, which is something we do at St. Matthew's once a year. But anyway, that's an aside. Father Corey?
Yeah, so I think we, our general level of both participation and accomplishment, I guess you could say, has increased over the years. I think when I first arrived, they were doing, especially during sort of, Trinity Tide and sort of the green season after Epiphany, maybe 7 or 8 hymns that were just kind of on rotation. It was it was dire, and not the ones you would necessarily expect either. So we, kind of when I started introducing new stuff, it was probably a little more ambitious than I should have been. Um, I think probably the hymnody turned into a penitential exercise for some people. But but we still have, I still have, but I think for the most part, people participate reasonably well. We have a couple of people who, if they don't know the hymn, aren't going to sing it. I have no interest in singing it or learning it, so that's fine. We have enough people on Sunday morning, praise God, that's not, when I first got here and we had 7 people on Sunday, if a couple aren't singing, then it's going to be a bit of a struggle. But I think I think as we've gone along, people have gotten generally, I think, a little more familiar with singing the unfamiliar, which is good. But again, I think to Sarah's point, it's a matter of, and again, I haven't always struck the right balance, but one unfamiliar hymn versus 4 unfamiliar hymns is a very different thing. And so we're and I don't, like I said, I still don't always get it right. I have one that well, and our parish is sort of weird in that we have quite a few people. I mean, I grew up unchurched, and then I was baptized as an Episcopalian in high school. Did my undergrad at Sewanee, so which has, and has a great choir so you're fairly well steeped in the Anglican tradition of hymnody and so I'm quite familiar with, most of the old Anglican standards. And we have quite a few people who are, former Episcopalians who, things that I guess that was sort of the surprise for me was hymns that I would take for granted as being kind of sort of part of the central mainstream of Anglican hymnody. People act like I pulled that out of, some entirely alien sort of thing. So, it's been a learning process for me as in particular, in terms of what being pastorally sensitive to what people, what I can expect of people and sort of what people are willing to have foisted upon them by their priest who wants to mess around with things. But fortunately, my organist is very much sort of gung ho about trying things out and doing new things, and so having him behind it has been very useful.
Having him behind you on the hymns? Or
Yeah, and basically being on board with trying out. If I say, "Why don't we try to do this?" He's always enthusiastic about it. So that's a huge help. Having the person who's chiefly responsible for making the music actually on board with what you're doing is invaluable.
Okay. Father Harrah?
So we have the difficulty of just having a critical mass of people that both don't sing, they don't naturally have very good voices, and then secondly, just don't know the hymns. So they're eager. These people are dear people, wonderful people, and there's a desire there. So it's not like sometimes parishioners, they're adamant they don't want to sing. That's not my people. That's not the people of St. Albans, thanks be to God. But they're limited. We're limited in that way. So I'm not entirely sure how to proceed. I'm praying that God brings people that sing to the parish, and but yeah, we gotta teach him the hymn tunes, the standard Anglican ones, as Father Corey said. I've got two people that are former Episcopalians, but that's it. So we've got people that are coming in that are unchurched, people that come from evangelical Christian backgrounds, and they don't know the hymns. So that's what I'm facing.
Yeah, because in some parishes, you can like, well, okay, this is a Lutheran hymn or a Baptist hymn or something, and everybody knows it. But it sounds like you have some people who aren't used to singing in church in general.
That's right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So you're starting more from scratch on that.
Right.
Okay, well, just very briefly, so Garrison Keillor supposedly said only Episcopalians can juggle a hymnal and a prayer book. So, what information does the parishioner in the pew have on which to get around to know what to sing? And why did you make that choice rather than some other choice? So, and if you have a hymnal, which hymnal is it, Father Corey?
Yeah, so when I first started at St. Edward's, we had the usual sort of, one sheet folded in half that just had the bare bones sort of cites to the Anglican Missal, the BCP, and the hymnal. And that I kind of realized over time, whenever we would have someone visit, over a couple of times I would say, how was this useful at all for you? And they would say, absolutely not. I had no idea what was going on. So I resolved to just, to dive in and just start doing sort of basically everything in the bulletin. Now we're helped by the fact that we have a printer in town who will print the bulletins for us for free. They've been doing that for years. So we're very blessed in that respect that we're not, if we were having to pay to have a 24-page bulletin printed every week, that would not be feasible.
And is your bulletin 24 pages?
Yeah, usually around that. I mean, I think it's 12 pages, but
Right.
it's about a 24-page booklet because I mean, basically everything's in there. We use the only thing I don't do is I still use hymnal numbers, but basically all the other text that anyone's hearing on Sunday morning is printed in there. And if we're using, so for the Aspergus, I have the music for the Aspergus in there since we started doing a new setting of the Kyrie and the Gloria, that music is in there as well. So basically someone needs the bulletin and the hymnal to follow along.
Which hymnal?
So we use the 1940. Occasionally we will use hymns from the 1982, which is, as much of a as much of a wreck as the 1979 prayer book was. The 82 hymnal is just, I think, a phenomenal hymnal, and it has some really excellent stuff in there, especially some stuff from the 20th century that isn't sort of the same Victorian, you know, stuff that you get in that comprises the majority of the 1940 hymnal. So occasionally I will, and when we do that, I'll put the sort of the actual music for that in the bulletin. So it's
Have
predominantly.
you ever seen the 2017 REC hymnal?
I have not. I think I have a copy of it. No, I don't, because I keep meaning to buy a copy of it and actually look it over. But yeah.
Because it has the ethos of the 40, but it has a lot more up to date, not only that's in the better stuff that's in the 82, but also some stuff after the 82. So
That's good to know. Yeah, I'll have to pick up a copy and start thinking about incorporating some of that in it, because I do think it's helpful to get people sort of introduced to the better 20th and 21st century hymnody, because again, our tradition has produced, I think, probably almost all of that. So we should be that's part of I think taking pride in our robust tradition of good hymnody. So
okay.
yeah.
All right. Thank you. Father Drew?
I'm sorry, Joel. Remind me of the question. Forgive me.
No, I ad-libbed it a little. So what do people, how do people, when they come to worship with you, know what to sing
Oh, right. Okay.
in terms of the whole booklet, hymn board, hymnal, all those choices?
So I inherited from Father Kevin Craig, which I am thankful for. He basically just sent me the text, the templates for the printed booklets for every mass. So I've used
At the
those.
parish where Sarah is right now.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Correct. So I basically use that same template, and so that everything it's meant to be as user friendly as possible, right? So that everything is printed in one singular booklet, with the exception of the hymns. So the hymns, they can pick up the hymnal. We do have a hymn board as well, but it's written, the hymn numbers are written in the booklet itself, and then we have a hymn board.
Are the
And then
canticles in the booklet, or are they in the hymnal?
you mean the mass parts?
The mass part.
Mass parts are in the booklet.
Okay.
The only thing that's not in the booklet is the Sursum Corda, but I figured, well, that's every week.
Lord be he with you.
Right.
Okay.
So they're doing that every week, so they'll figure that out. But everything else is printed, with the
Okay.
exception of the hymns.
And that's just because do you have more than one mass setting in the year, or do you use the same mass setting for 12 months?
Right. So right now, because the limiting it, the singing is so limited, I've decided we're not changing it for a while. So
So
we've been
basically your
doing-
booklet week in, week out have the same mass setting.
Correct.
Got it. Okay. Because I know for some churches that have the mass setting in the hymnal, sorry, in the booklet, that switch over kind of causes stress, I guess, because they have to have two sets of booklets as templates and anyway.
Right.
So, okay. All right. Sarah?
So everything, I feel we're a little fancy because we print everything. So the hymn music, obviously the liturgy, and then the service music.
But you don't have a hymnal in the pews, so you pretty much have to put the music in the booklet, right?
Yes. So when we first started in 2020, we were meeting in Father Kevin's backyard for a little while due to COVID restrictions, and we could have utilized hymnals. I would say I found the participation decreased with having to rely on a physical, and I think for me also the limitations of a singular hymnal were a little bit confining. So Father Kevin likes the 1940 hymnal, which is great. I was really familiar with the 82 hymnal and found that to be a little bit more accessible. And so we initially had a little bit of a conversation about, are we going to use a hymnal? And I think the thought was we would only stick with the 1940 hymnal. But then over time, I think, I'm a big fan of having the printed music. So even if we're utilizing something else outside of the 40 hymnal, I really wanted the sheet music printed, because even though a parishioner might not be able to read the music, I think over time, I would like to think through osmosis, they're kind of picking up on, oh, this note goes up or down, even just that simple of a recognition by someone, I think to me is important. And also it makes having a sheet of music in front of you less daunting. So I think increasing familiarity with that was important to me. But another factor is a lot of families in our church have young kids, and there practically was very little space for a parent to have two things in their hand and also be trying to tell their kid to sit down or whatever. So a large part it was practical, but also, personally, I think exposure to sheet music is a good thing, whether or not you understand everything that's on the page. But it also allowed us to utilize different resources. So we print everything, sheet music. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm pretty hardcore hymnal 1940 chauvinist fanatic. But for my daughter's church in college, we bought the REC hymnal, the 2017 hymnal, because it had some of the newer hymns and it didn't have the sort of textual modernizations that the 82 hymnal had. So some of the Christmas carols, for example, are gender neutered in the 82 that they're not in the 40 or the REC hymnal. But anyway, so that's just another option people can keep in mind. But okay, well.
Oh, sorry, quick question. Is the REC, is that the Book of Common Praise hymnal? I'm not
Yes.
always.
Yes, Book of Common Praise.
Because I will say that's probably my current favorite hymnal. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It is a compromise. It is a trade-off between the sort of the conservative ethos of the continuing church and the 40 hymnal, and the more modern, up-to-date content of the 82. And it's 30 years newer than the 82. But anyway, so that's we bought that for our daughter's church and college because they wanted something that did both, that had more up to date and also still had the ethos of the 40. So okay. So are there, we kind of want to sort of wrap things up, but are there any resources you use for planning a sung service, picking hymns or the music for the year? Or any resources in particular that you didn't know when you started that you wish you'd known about and you'd want to tell somebody that they should have? So I don't know who would be next. I guess I'll go to start from the top. Father Drew.
So the majority of the last year, we didn't have an organist. So that means I was doing everything musically, which included choosing the hymns. Now that we have an organist, I've given him that liberty. So he's doing that now. But I think we're aligned in the sense that I think whoever's doing that needs to be sensitive to the church here, sensitive to the propers for the Sunday, so that there's a synthesis that happens there. The propers are thematic generally, and so if you can work with that theme. I think the hymnal has, if I recall, it's got a section in it that the 1940 has a Trinity 15. Here you go. Here's some
Yep.
options.
Mm-hmm.
There's a website that does the same, episcopalnet.org. If you go to that website, episcopalnet.org, you click on, so I'm looking at it right now. You click it, this Sunday is Trinity 12, or excuse me, it's Trinity 17, but it's the 12th, October 12th. If you scroll down, you can click on that, and then you have the hymn suggestions right there. So that's that's online.
Okay.
So that's a recommendation, but that's all I've got.
Okay. Sarah?
I also use that same website. So having been in this role for 5 years, and for the ACC, we just repeat the readings every year. As opposed to ACNA, we did ABC years. So I will say, I mean, obviously I look back on what I picked the year prior, but I still every Sunday will go to, that website, the Episcopal website, to just see what they're suggesting. I also really appreciate the 2017 RIC suggestion for each Sunday. And yeah, I would say that's kind of, I still go back to review the hymns I'm picking just to make sure that that's what I still want to choose. And honestly, sometimes throughout the year, I'll hear a hymn, like a traditional hymn that I haven't heard before, that I find that I want to incorporate. And so I just want to be sensitive to allowing for new material as well.
Is there an example, one that you heard, say, in this year that you hadn't heard before that you wanted to incorporate?
Yeah, I would say so. The albums by these Benedictine nuns, and they're Catholic, but there's a hymn called "Oh Lord, I Am Not Worthy," and I find that very singable. I did kind of have to hunt around for some of the lyrics were theologically more Catholic maybe than I wanted for our parish, but the essence was really good. So something like that. And so we printed it, and I enjoyed singing it. The other resources I use, there's a Gregorian chant website that actually has the minor propers in the Latin, and so you can use that. I will use that for like an anthem, for instance. So I'll sing it in Latin and kind of have the organ as the chant tone underneath it. But for day to day, I organize all my hymns in a Google sheet. And so I just look back at the years prior. But I would say pretty similar to Father Drew, the hymnal index and that one website are probably the most utilized for me.
Thank you. Father Corey?
Yeah, similarly, that's sort of what we use as well. And I kind of also follow Sarah's practice of looking back over the bulletin from last year and saying, oh, this is what I picked, and saying, do I want to stick with these, or, sort of go a different direction. Sometimes there's a bit of, just sort of, I don't know what you would call it, sort of the sortes, him sort of just opening the hymnal and seeing where I land and saying, oh, that's one that we haven't done before, and I kind of look at it and say, yeah, let's. I don't do that most time, but I'm like, there's one that I'm not wild about. Just saying if the Holy Spirit chooses a better hymn than I might have been able to. Uh, but in terms of the other resources we use, for the minor propers, we use primarily the English Gradual, which is put out by, or I think it's the Royal Society of Church Music.
RCSM, yeah.
Yeah, and
The
it's
purple books?
fine. Yeah, that's right. The which is fine. I'm not really wild about the fact that the all of the melodies for all of the minor propers are the same every single Sunday. But I did find there's a small volume put out. I think Palmer was the editor, called Sarum Introits, which I think you can find on archive.org. But it has the actual Gregorian melody, at least for the introits for every Sunday. So we've been doing that for about, I think, a year or so, maybe a little longer than that, year and a half now. And so there's at least some variety in the minor propers from week to week, which I like. In terms of, whenever we're looking at, but the the red volume of the English Gradual, which has all the settings of the ordinary in it, I think is quite good. And that's what we've been doing in updating some of what we use for the ordinary. We've been using those.
You say red volume, is that the RCSM?
Yep, that's right. I think it's volume 1.
Got it.
But beyond that, we use the St. Dunstan Psalter for whenever we do evensong for chanting the Psalms, which is fine. I think people are, in rehearsing it, people have gotten used to the plain song notation, so it's okay. But as with so much of this, if you're using the missal, there aren't a ton of resources out there, and so you're kind of limited to what you can make use of. But
Father, if I may
beyond
jump
that,
in real quick there,
yeah.
just on the note of the St. Dunstan Psalter, there is a PDF of the entire St. Dunstan Psalter in standard notation.
Oh,
It's available online.
oh, that's good to know. Yeah, that I would, or if you have the link to that, if you could share it, that would be great, because I would greatly
I want to follow up, and we'll post that as
that
part
would,
of
yeah,
this.
that would be excellent. And then beyond that, Lancelot Andrews Press has a noted version of the Missal, which is really good for those days where you have um, there are things that should be chanted, like Candlemas or Ash Wednesday, but of course the Missal doesn't provide the chants for that. So, but they have the traditional chants for some of those days, as well for all of Holy Week. So there's a lot of stuff. Yeah, so that's kind of what we use. And it's, sort of, I'm always on the lookout for stuff that we can use to make it sort of conform more to sort of the Western Rite, the musical traditions of the Western Rite more broadly. So
Okay, all right. Well, I have a couple of exit questions, and so we'll go ahead and try to wrap things up. The first exit question is, we all have hopes and dreams of what we might do to make our music better. And so just, do you have like a particular near-term goal for improving the variety or quality of your parish music, like in the next year or two? And then you have some sort of long-term dream or stretch goal? And I guess I'll start with you, Father Corey.
Yeah, I think for me, my immediate sort of short term is just like I said earlier, to get a choir together, 4 or 5 voices. I think we're going to attempt lessons and carols this year, which will be the first time we've done it at the parish in a long time, if ever. So that's kind of the short term ambitions there. And longer term, I think is really just to have a consistent sort of choir that can be um, performing at least a motet or an anthem or something every Sunday, just to continue to increase and improve the quality of our musical worship. So
Okay, thank you. Sarah?
So short term, we're trying to figure out the audio setup for our church. I don't love, I mean, I would love it if we're just acoustic, but unfortunately that's not the best, I think, for our church right now. So just trying to find, it's not a production in one sense, but we need some technological help, I think, to assist with worship. So trying to just figure out, what equipment we need, et cetera, for that. And then also,
And you're talking about the audio of you and your husband being heard, not projection of
yeah,
lyrics on the screen.
yeah, so like mics, cables, all of that type of thing.
Got it.
Because
Okay.
there's only two of us, and honestly, the architecture of the church itself, the sanctuary is a little bit. Even if we did have a choir, I'm not sure that it would project well enough. The space is a little bit odd, so I'm trying to figure that out. But I would love to have a 4-part choir. I think for our church, we would need to hire um 2 to 4 consistent singers on a part because our church is so small. And I'm not sure that anyone could consistently volunteer for that type of role, something like that. Reach wise, a children's choir twice a year, lessons and carols every year, having hired instrumentalists for the Christmas Easter season. I'm thinking like 2 instrumentalists, and then even song, or at least evening prayer, having that be some element of music incorporated. And I really do wish that, like Father Corey, if we're introducing some type of new music, or if we wanted to do even a more informal seasonal hymn sing or a Taizé service, something like that, that to me would be really lovely. But um, I also have another job, so I think in large part that's a limit for myself. But yeah, I mean, we pray every week for the development of our music ministry. So in time, I think hopefully God will send us those resources and people.
Thank you, Sarah.
So the immediate goal is that God would send us a cantor, and I'm thinking about just bolstering the congregational singing, how that can be improved. I like the idea that I've heard about hymn sing or weekly even. I hope that the interest would be there. I'm not sure that the interest would be there, but I'll put the feelers out for that. That's a good idea. A long-term goal, of course, you want to reach into as much as you can the full panoply of the Anglican musical tradition. And so we'd love to get a choir, love to. Our organ is 1965-ish electronic organ, maybe a new organ that's better. Those are long-term goals that I have.
Thank you. Okay, last, so you're saying the McLaughlin group. Let's exit with one last question. So imagine a small parish like your own wants to make an effort to step up their parish singing. What one piece of advice would you like to give them?
I'll begin there. So I think that if the priest does not sing, the priest needs to learn to sing. So I commend Father Corey for working on that. I think that's just really important. So that would be my one piece of advice. If you're discerning holy orders, you're in holy orders, you're serving at a parish, you don't sing, you need to remedy that. So seek out somebody who does, find somebody who does, and start to take lessons and learn.
So in management theory, we would say lead by example.
Okay.
Or in your former uniform service, we would say that as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, Sarah?
It is a little bit of a tough question for me to answer, because I do think at times it is parish dependent on the parish limitations.
Well, what about a parish that doesn't have a music program at all? That is too scared to do a music program.
I mean, of course, I would say any music is better than no music. So arriving at St. Thomas, they had no music. And it was a lot of ambient, honestly, children noise, which is totally fine. But when you're trying to maybe worship and you hear a lot of other sounds apart from even just silence, it was a little bit distracting. And so I think it doesn't have to be your long-term goal realized in that exact moment for you to exclude music. It can be something very simple. I mean, I think just starting with any piece of music that is accessible for the parish is better than nothing at all. And yeah, I don't know. I think I find most parishes try to get really creative at first. And honestly, I would say just start with chant, because it's already there for you. People have done it before. And that's a very solid place to start that utilizes the Bible and has good theology and is simple enough for most congregations to follow along. And I think that most priests should know how to chant in general. Especially in our tradition, they should know how to chant. So your priest should be able to lead you in some type of chant, and that's probably where I would start.
Thank you. Dean French?
Yeah, I mean, I would 100% exercise, or second and third, what both Father Harrah and Sarah both said is that, yeah, if you're as a priest, if you're up front, or I mean, really, yeah, any priest should learn how to chant. It is sort of the foundation of our worship, as both in the West and in the East. That's the foundation of Christian music, and so it's a good place to start because you can add on to that and build on top of that foundation more easily. And I think, yeah, just beginning sort of where you are, as Sarah said, and working with sort of the resources that you have in terms of people who have some musical background, people who are willing to work on it. So much of our sort of what we've developed in terms of congregational singing has been having people who are in, maybe not wholly enthusiastic, but at least enthusiastic enough to be willing to work can be able to commit to working on it. So I think you can, if you have a group of people, and it doesn't have to be that many, a few, you can start working on things and building and sort of growing toward better music. It helps to have someone who knows music at least well enough. I mean, I can't lead a choir rehearsal well because I can do chant, but I can't really, beyond that, my facilities with music are limited. But I would imagine probably most parishes have at least someone who can, if nothing else, sit down at a piano and pick out a melody line, and you can go from there. But it requires some imagination, it requires some dedication, but I think even the small churches can get to the point where they're at least offering something that is not just mostly a said mass and maybe a hymn or two every Sunday, and can kind of expand beyond that. So
great, thank you. Thank you all for joining us. I think this has been a wonderful session, our first session and continuing forward about music, and hopefully not our last. And we appreciate your being here today and sharing your expertise with our audience. So with that, we'll conclude. Thank you very much.